Vicara. I am the Washington Bureau Chief for NewsNation. We are now trying to take in the news, reporting the big news, the expected news from the Supreme Court. It happened about 10 o'clock Eastern time today, a decision day at the Supreme Court. A number of decisions handed down, but the big one was saved to the end, and that is the Mississippi abortion case. And it is not effectively, but explicitly, the Supreme Court has overturned 49 years of precedent and Roe versus Wade, turning the decisions on abortions to the state on a state-by-state basis, and perhaps even going beyond that. We're going to be talking about the fallout from this case for several days. We're going to try to get into it a little bit now. First of all, the decision itself. We know about the leak of the draft opinion from Justice Samuel Alito that struck down Roe, unprecedented, reported in Politico about 5 weeks ago. And since then, the country, and if not the world, have been waiting in anticipation of exactly what would happen. And as expected, no significant changes from that leak. Alito writing for the majority saying Roe versus Wade is overturned, and a lot of repercussions in a very lengthy opinion from Alito and the six justices that joined him in backing this case, which stemmed from that abortion clinic, the sole abortion clinic in Mississippi passing a law that brought down to 15 weeks, after which women in Mississippi could not legally obtain an abortion. The previous standard under Roe had been 24 weeks. Advocates of abortion rights say 15 weeks. Most women are unaware that they're even pregnant at that point. So a 6-3 decision from the Supreme Court along the familiar lines of Republican-appointed judges and democratically appointed judges, Democratic presidents and Republican presidents, backing up Mississippi, the state of Mississippi, and bringing that threshold down to 15 weeks for legal abortions in Mississippi. But more significantly, going further, overturning explicitly, right in the first paragraph of this decision, Roe versus Wade. That decision, interestingly, 5-4, not 6-3, because Chief Justice John Roberts joined in the minority democratically appointed justices in saying that went too far to fully overturn Roe. Again, the 1973 decision affirmed in 1992 in the Casey case at the Supreme Court. We saw also, interestingly, in a concurring opinion, Justice Thomas, Clarence Thomas, not only saying that Roe, concurring that Roe should be overturned, but going so far as to say that other landmark Supreme Court cases that deal with civil rights in this country that rest on the so-called due process clause of the Constitution should also be overturned. And that includes the Obergefell decision, which granted same-sex marriage, the Lawrence versus Texas decision, which overturned state laws that effectively banned gay sex, and also a decision, the landmark decision in Griswold on contraception, that also rested on due process. This wasn't inferred. This is what Clarence Thomas came out and said in his concurring written opinion at the Supreme Court. So that's also getting a lot of attention. The scathing dissent from Elena Kagan, among others, pointing to the partisan divide on the Supreme Court as being really the only thing that's changed. Overturning the precedent, that in itself very rare, the principle of stare decisis, that precedents carry the day. In fact, Roe had been the law of the land for 49 years, now overturned. So a momentous day, an historic day, a landmark decision from the Supreme Court. We've seen an outpouring of passionate reaction outside the court at the very moment this was made known. Remember, crowds had been gathering outside, not only outside the court, but outside of the homes of justices over the course of the last several weeks on each of these so-called decision days, which came 2 and 3 times a week, ever since that leak of the Alito draft. So now we know that Roe versus Wade is overturned. The Mississippi case, Mississippi is the state government and legislature of Mississippi upheld in restricting abortion. But again, a lot of states going much further. The decision going a lot further, and it brings up a question of whether states where abortion will remain legal, because if you stick to the Mississippi case, that essentially makes it a state-by-state decision. But in overturning Roe altogether and saying there is no constitutional right to abortion in the Constitution, they found no constitutional right to abortion. That opens the door for legal challenges in states like Maryland, for example, or California, where there are far fewer restrictions on abortion. That opens the door to legal challenges in those states. There's also states like Texas, if you recall, they outlawed helping someone get an abortion, essentially. There's concern now that these states will pass laws that many states will do something similar and try to outlaw helping others who want an abortion, can't get it in their home state, travel to a state that allows abortion, whether that home state will try to outlaw that, whether many companies that are now instituting healthcare coverage for individuals and women who want to go to states where abortion is legal to travel to those states, to have their insurance cover the travel. There's thinking that many of these states will try to go after that, and that will be challenged in court. So this is by no means the end of the fight, the end of the road in the abortion battle. There are going to be many battles to come. We can also look towards Congress, and we heard President Biden today and Nancy Pelosi and other Democratic leaders said that they are going to make an effort to codify, in other words, pass a law that would put the right of abortion in law. Remember, Roe versus Wade was a court case. There was no corresponding law passed by Congress. Congress is talking about doing that. Majority Democrats in both the House and the Senate. The problem is their majorities are nowhere near big enough, and the issue doesn't neatly cleave along partisan lines to begin with. And so certainly for abortion rights advocates, a dark day. For those who have fought for almost 50 years now to overturn Roe versus Wade, it's cause for celebration. We do have a question in our chat here. Have other justices said anything about LGBTQ rights and contraceptives? Yes. This was the Griswold case and the Obergefell case, as well as the Lawrence case that I was just alluding to, and Clarence Thomas in his concurring opinion has called now those into question. It was only 2015 the Obergefell case legalized marriage equality, same-sex marriage in the United States, only 7 years ago. And so now that is being that's talked about as being put on the table. You know, it was interesting. Clarence Thomas cited cases decided on the due process, resting on the due process law of the Constitution. The due process clause ensures that any American has the right to due process before someone can take away their inalienable rights. There had been a lot of legal criticism of Roe and the legal reasoning behind it over the last 49 years. But he extends that to contraceptives. He extends that to same-sex marriage. He extends that to anti-gay sex laws writ large. One thing he did not extend that to, which also rests on the due process clause, is the 1965 case of Loving versus Virginia, which made interracial marriage legal across the land. Up until that point, they used to call it miscegenation. Many states had outlawed interracial marriage. Clarence Thomas not mentioning that in his concurring opinion is something that should be looked at. So another question here in our chat. Biden says it's now up to Congress. How likely is it they will pass protections? Again, not very. Democrats have, I believe, it fluctuates depending on who retires or who falls ill or who withdraws from the House of Representatives. I think it's now a 4-seat majority in the House of Representatives, and certainly not every Democrat is going to vote for abortion rights, and not every Republican is going to vote against abortion rights. But a very tough vote, very near thing in the House, and it's unlikely they could pass anything. Just leaving aside the Senate, where, of course, it's a 50-50 split with the vice president having the tying vote. And they're not going to come. Everything that happens in the Senate, if anything is to happen in the Senate, requires 60 votes of the 100 senators, a supermajority, what we call the filibuster. That's not going to happen in the Senate. It seems very unlikely at this point. But if you look at beyond the case and the implications for women, whatever side of the issue that you're on, if you look at the political dynamic going here, aside from, again, the core issue, the political dynamic, I mean, Democrats heading into the November midterm elections are having a hard time with enthusiasm from their base. Obviously, the Democratic base is very much pro-abortion rights. It just crass, cold-eyed politics. It could help Democrats marginally, or perhaps significantly, I don't know, amp up the enthusiasm that has been lacking in the primary season of their base. And we heard the President of the United States today talking about the need to vote in November if you disagree with what he called a tragic decision from the Supreme Court. So a lot to chew on here in this landmark ruling from the Supreme Court, this long-awaited ruling, the landmark ruling coming down on this Friday. Another question from our chat. What's it like in D.C. right now? D.C. goes through these convulsions every once in a while, and a point of personal privilege. There is, thank you. There is something. It's sort of something we're used to on a big news day. Obviously, this is beyond just a big news day. This is something that's going to deeply affect people's lives and their beliefs. The Supreme Court right now, there are still people milling about. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, Chief Justice John Roberts, Justice Alito, Justice Coney Barrett. Obviously, all of the justices maintain a residence here in the DMV, the District, Maryland, Virginia, as we call it. And they have seen protests outside their house. Typically, it's one day a week, usually Wednesday. But we are expecting to see more protests now at those justices' homes. This is something that's obviously become very controversial. There is a group now, sort of a shadowy group that nobody knows a lot about, called Jane's Revenge, that has vowed to turn this, the day the decision comes down, into a night of rage. And so a lot of people are tense, a heavy police presence outside the homes of these justices. Now we've had a look at them. We've had our producers go out and see what it's like there. And we do expect some protests throughout Washington. And there are groups that are calling for protests throughout the country tonight. How those protests turn out, which sides are protesting, certainly we can expect abortion rights protesters to take the streets tonight, if not pro-life protesters as well. So it's going to be, we're just getting started with this fight here. It's been 49 years. It's probably going to continue into the next chapter in the post-Roe versus Wade world. Okay, that's it. That's all I've got for you tonight. I am Mike Vaccaro, the Bureau Chief for NewsNation in Washington. An historic day, Roe versus Wade overturned at the Supreme Court. Thanks a lot.